Welcome to episode 7 of the Pro Overwatch News Recap. If you missed the previous episode, this is going to be the second part to that, as the video would have been way too long if I didn't separate this into two parts. There's a lot to cover though, and there's a lot to give my thoughts on, so let's just dive straight into it, shall we? Team number 1 I wanted to cover is the Shanghai Dragons. So on November 8th, they announced the departure of their main support player, Coma. In my eyes, Coma was very consistent on both Lucio and Mercy, and he played a crucial role in that Stage 3 title run. Seeing the Dragons release him is a little sad though. He's been with guys like Ding and Luffy for a long time now, so it's going to be strange seeing him play elsewhere without them. But why is it that the Dragons got rid of Coma when he was their only main support? Well, Halo can actually help explain that, as Shanghai is rumored to be signing runaway main support Lee Jae-gong. Lee Jae-gong impressed me during the gauntlet, so I think swapping out Coma for him is understandable. In other news, the Dragons announced the re-signing of Envy, Gaguri, Izayaki, Luffy, Ding, Diem, and Dia, who is now under a two-way contract. I'm not really surprised to see any of these guys come back, to be honest. I thought it was a given that Ding, Diem, Izayaki, Luffy, and Gaguri would all come back. And with Dia being a Chinese player who really doesn't play much for the Dragons, I'm sure he was more than willing to play in contenders if it meant he got to see some more action. Envy is a bit more interesting though, because he was re-signed but is allowed to look for a new team still. With the Dragons rumored to be signing Void, it's pretty understandable why Envy would be interested in looking for more opportunities. With that said, if he does end up getting traded, this would be his 4th Overwatch League team in 3 years, and that sounds pretty rough if you ask me. Envy just can't seem to find his place in this league. No matter where he goes, there's some sort of problem. On the Valiant, he was rumored to be toxic. On Toronto, he did not want to be part of an English-speaking roster, plus I heard he was toxic there too, and now Void is looking to take his starting job away from him on Shanghai. Hopefully everything works out for him in the end though. He's been through a lot. Then the final piece of Shanghai news to talk about is them officially acquiring Fleta from the Seoul Dynasty. Now, I've covered this in a previous news recap, but we've known about this rumor for a good amount of time, and although I've talked about my thoughts on it before, I will say that I think this was a really good move. With Youngjin gone, they needed someone to fill out that empty flex DPS spot, and what better way to do so than with Fleta? This team was unbelievably close to making the overall playoffs this year, and I really do think that Fleta can help elevate this team to that next level if he learns to be a bit more consistent. Fleta is very skilled, but there are moments where he seems to do absolutely nothing, and I don't think it's because of anything he's doing in game necessarily. I think it's all mental. Fleta has superstar potential, and I really think the Dragons can help him fully realize it if they coach him properly and find a way to get himself out of his own head. As for the Dynasty, well, you can safely assume they probably got a good chunk of change from this agreement. It sucks to not see potential Prophet in Fleta DPS line, but with Prophet being a super flex with a very similar hero pool to Fleta's, I can see why the Dynasty decided this would probably be for the best. It really does suck though. Prophet and Fleta playing together would allow for a team to literally run any composition they wanted to, since those two can basically play every DPS you can imagine. Up next on the agenda though, now we have to talk about the Atlanta Reign. The Reign have been making some power moves these last couple of days, starting with their player additions. They signed Jisoo Busan hitscan player Edison and former Team Envy hitscan player Sharp. To be honest, both of these signings are massive. These two players in particular have been receiving so much hype, and now the Reign have both of them. They are both insanely talented hitscan players who can dominate on whatever you need them to play, whether it's Sombra, Widow, Tracer, or even McCree. Atlanta is looking to have a really strong roster in Season 3 with how things currently stand. That DPS line is scary. A DPS rotation of Erster, Edison, Sharp, and Babybay sounds deadly. There is a little bit of oversaturation since Babybay, Sharp, and Edison kind of have similar hero pools, but I'm sure they'll make it work. Babybay might not even play much though, since Edison and Sharp are so good. Instead, he might just have to be that veteran leader on the team that everybody rallies behind, or maybe he ends up on a new team in the future through a trade. Either way, the Reign have given themselves some pretty dangerous weapons to work with at DPS. Atlanta looks to have a potential top tier team if you ask me. I am definitely looking forward to seeing what this roster is capable of this year. Now for some sad news. I know a lot of people love him for the heroic plays he made, but the Atlanta Reign announced they are officially parting ways with Dako. Early on in the season, Dako was clearly one of the hard carries on this roster. His Diva and Roadhog play were extraordinary. But the rumors of him being toxic, plus him kind of just getting benched in favor of FRD late into the year, kind of gave me this feeling that Dako wouldn't be staying. And in episode 5 of my news recap series, it became even more evident this would be the case when the Reign promoted Hawk from their academy team to their main roster. I'm assuming that Dako will eventually find a new team because he's way too talented not to, but I'm not quite sure if he'll find a team to start the 2020 season. There aren't a lot of teams in desperate need of a starting off tank as it currently stands, so I doubt Dako signs somewhere anytime soon unless he knows he'll be getting playtime. time. Have no worries though, Dako fans. I'm sure somebody's going to sign him. I just don't know when exactly. Along with the Dako release, the team also said goodbye to Enlier. And while Enlier is a talented player who showed flashes when he actually got time on stage, he was kind of expendable with the Atlanta Reign signing 2 new players that basically play the same heroes as he does. And they also have Baby Bay too, so it just didn't make sense to hold on to Enlier anymore. Like with all other players looking for new teams, I wish Enlier nothing but the best. I have no clue who's going to be interested in signing him, but hopefully he finds a contenders team at the very least. Moving on from the Atlanta Reign, next up on the list is the Doral Spark. The Spark, who already signed their main core from last year, went the extra mile by re-signing Bazzi, and if you ask me, this was definitely the right move to make. I know he didn't play a big part in the regular season, but he certainly made his presence felt during the playoffs. I would say you could argue he was a top 5 Doomfist in the playoffs with the sheer amount of pop-off moments he had. I think him, Godspeed, and Doral will make for a really strong trio. Now that Bazzi has proven himself, I think there's a good chance he's more involved in the rotation this season. The other piece of Spark player news I have for you is that Revenge has been released. Bebe was the consistent starter for this team by around stage 2, and with how much he improved as the season went along, it became more and more obvious that Revenge just wasn't needed. I honestly have no idea if Revenge is even good enough to find a new home in the Overwatch League, just because I still feel it's unclear what his ceiling is since he only got 2 hours of stage time last year. Maybe somebody gives him a shot, but I think he'll more than likely end up on a contenders team for the time being. The Spark also made some additions to their coaching staff by signing Ya as an assistant coach. This pickup is actually pretty solid. Ya has some good experience under his belt. He coached on the Florida Mayhem and Lunatic High, surprisingly. With a resume like that, he'll surely make for an excellent addition to the staff. Moving on to the Toronto Defiant, they capped off their successful offseason by signing both Nevix and Kelix, and I personally like both of these players a lot, so Toronto has my approval. To start with Nevix, he honestly is so much better than people give him credit for. In my opinion, he has always been a starting caliber player for this league. He honestly played well for the Shotgun both seasons 1 and 2. It's just that Choyobin progressed very quickly and is now seen as probably the best off-tank in the world. But I don't think Choyobin would have reached this level if it weren't for Nevix teaching him how to play Sigma and pushing him to get better every single day. Choi has even admitted to this on Twitter after Dak called him out. Nevix deserves another chance to start, and I'm so happy Toronto realized this. Nevix has the leadership qualities and work ethic that any coach would want in his or her player. Along with that, he can play every off-tank hero in the game at a high level. This guy is absurdly flexible, and I'm really looking forward to see what he contributes to the Defiant. And how about this Kelix pickup? I know some people won't even bat an eye over it, but I have always had really high praise for Kelix. I honestly think he's better than people give him credit for. His Lucio in particular is exceptionally strong. I have always thought of Kelix as a great person and leader. It's actually insane how many players I like on this Toronto team now that I think about it though. I'm a huge fan of Agilities, Kariv, Surefour, Logix, Mangachu, Kelix, and Nevix. If I wasn't a loyal Valiant fan, I'd probably jump ship to Toronto. Big congrats to Toronto though on a very, very successful offseason. They managed to make some massive upgrades to their team. Not only that, but they are now crazy marketable. Bringing in more Canadians was a really smart idea, and getting the likes of Kariv and Nevix only makes it better. In my opinion, they are easily one of the most likable and marketable teams in the league, and I expect their fanbase to increase substantially this year. Oh, and before I forget, Toronto also signed Alblis as their team manager and assistant coach for anybody who cares. Alblis is a former caster who was also part of the Paris Eternal staff during Season 2. And that's basically everything I have to say about Toronto, so let's talk about the Washington Justice now, shall we? So to bolster their roster and make up for the lack of flex support players on their team, they went out and signed former Boston Uprising flex support Aim God. I was a little sad to see the Justice let go of Sleepy, but I can understand why they did it now. Aim God is a definite upgrade. I know a lot of Aim God fans were really mad when Boston permabenched him last year, and for good reason. He is such a talented player, and he played a big role in Boston's early success in Season 2. And the moment he got benched is when things took a turn for the worst. The Aim God benching was the beginning of a long downward trend that spiraled out of control for Boston. There are rumors that heavily imply Aim God was not happy on Boston. He was supposedly not getting along with Kelix or the organization in general, I guess, so they benched him. Now is Aim God's chance to come back with a vengeance. Him and Arc sound like a pretty strong support line on paper. I am a little worried that Aim God might have attitude issues still, but I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he was just in a bad situation on Boston. I have faith that this move does end up working out. After all, if Aim God somehow acts toxic in what is probably the most positive environment in the league, then he's just a bad person. I'm sorry, but if you somehow act toxic when you have Corey, Stratus, and Arc as teammates, then there's something wrong with you. But with this move, we now have a projected starting lineup for the Justice, and it consists of Corey, Stratus, Arc, Aim God, Losish/Roar, and Elivo. That looks pretty good if you ask me. the Justice are looking to be a pretty competitive team as it currently stands. Along with the Aim God signing, the Justice announced the addition of 2 new coaches. Supreme, who formerly coached the Spark, joins as a player development coach, and Wiz is going to be the team's new strategic coach. But I honestly don't know anything else about Wiz, unfortunately. His Liquipedia page is completely blank, so I don't know what types of experience he has under his belt, if he has any at all. Now let's talk Boston Uprising. I mentioned the rumors in a previous news recap, but now they have officially signed both Swimmer and Muffin, who will be a 2-way player. I think these 2 signings are actually really good. Swimmer is somebody the fans have wanted to see in this league for a long time, and rightfully so. He tends to pop off on stream, and he's looked good in contenders from what I've heard. And from what I've seen on stream, he can play a mean Lucio, Ana, and Baptiste. Muffin, though, has been rising up through the ranks really fast. At first, people started hyping him up after he looked good in the Team Canada tryouts over the summer, then all of that attention he was receiving ended up landing him a spot on the Uprising's Academy team. Then just 3 months after getting signed by them, he has now received a promotion. Now, since he is a 2-way player, that does mean we won't be seeing much of him for the time being, and that Boston still needs to sign a new off-tank player. But I wouldn't be surprised if Muffin ends up being a full-time player at some point during the season. He honestly has a lot of potential. I'm liking these moves from Boston a lot. We also have some brief news to cover in regards to the Fusion. They didn't get any players, but they did bolster their staff with the additions of Christopher and Moby Dick as coaches, and I'm probably going to mispronounce this, but Saita as a strategic analyst. So Christopher is well experienced in the pro scene. He's been around since 2016 and has been part of 2 of the UK's World Cup teams. Since the 2018 World Cup qualifiers, Christopher has become a coach. This will be his first coaching job in the Overwatch League though, and I'm sure he's going to do great. He's well experienced. Moby Dick, on the other hand, does already have some experience in the league as he coached on the Toronto Defiant during Stage 4. Then there's Saita, who, like with Christopher, has been around for quite a bit. He's coached Team Giganti and the Paris Eternal. Although he's now stepping into a different role since he'll be a strategic analyst instead of a coach, I think he's going to do just fine because this community has really high regards for this guy, so I'm confident in his ability to contribute to the Fusion's success this year. Now let's go over the very somber London Spitfire news, shall we? I'm super sorry, London fans, but with them officially announcing the departure of Badoshan alongside Quartermain, London's Season 1 Championship roster has been completely dismantled now that Badoshan's gone. Not a single player from that team now remains, and the only person left from Season 2 is actually Krillin. London really is starting fresh, and we can expect a whole bunch of announcements from them very soon since their roster consists of only 3 players as of this recording. I know this is sad news for all London fans, but don't give up hope. Fuse, Krillin, and Bernard are all pieces with good potential. Depending on who else they get, this team could still be somewhat competitive. The question is though, where does Badoshan end up signing? There's probably a handful of potential destinations for him, right? Maybe he signs with the Dynasty, or possibly even Florida, or maybe he ends up having to come off the bench somewhere. Make sure to let me know where you think Badoshan signs down in the comment section. Moving on to the Houston Outlaws, they decided to part ways with Bonnie. With Boink getting all of the playtime at the main support position this year, it was pretty obvious that the Outlaws no longer wanted Bonnie on their team. As great as Bonnie was in Season 1, I get this feeling that his game has taken a step or 2 backwards in 2019. I'm assuming that either Boink was completely outplaying him in scrims, or Bonnie just wasn't playing nearly good enough. Bonnie has good experience under his belt though, so maybe somebody's willing to give him a chance. I really like Bonnie, so hopefully everything works out for him. Another significant move made by the Outlaws is them officially picking up Dante's team option. I honestly would be surprised if they let Dante go. In my opinion, he was easily their best player last year. If it weren't for his Sombra, then there's no way the Outlaws would have had that resurgence in Stage 3. Part of the reason they were even competitive this year to begin with in some of their games was because of him constantly bailing them out. Thank goodness the Outlaws brought him back. I would have been very disappointed if they didn't. In case you missed it or didn't watch my previous video, the Outlaws also signed Rappel, formerly of the Vancouver Titans, and this is a very interesting and bold move. I thought the Outlaws were probably done with Korean players after letting go of Arhan and then also their coach Tyrone, but it would seem I was wrong, and for the first time ever, the Outlaws actually have some competition at the flex support position. It's not just Ruckus, so I think this was a really good move, even if Rappel is still kind of unproven. Let's also dive into the Houston Outlaws rumor mill, as according to Halo of Thoughts on Twitter, the Outlaws have signed Meko to their team, and I still can't get over this. Like, what? Meko is going to the Houston Outlaws. This is very unexpected news, and congrats to the Outlaws. This is a massive upgrade at the off-tank position, and God knows they desperately needed one of those. But why did Meko want to sign with the Outlaws in the first place? That's what I'm wondering. The only thing I can think of is that the Outlaws threw a bunch of money at him, like so much that it was unrefusable, because why else would he want to go there? It's mostly an English-speaking team, and he's used to being on full Korean teams. He doesn't really fit in with the culture of the Outlaws, it feels like. There has to be a good reason. I think that's definitely part of the reason they got Rappel, if I'm going to be completely honest, because now Meko's not going to be completely alone. He won't be the only Korean player. Maybe some more Korean players end up joining the Outlaws. Who knows at this point? But if this Meko rumor is true, then the Outlaws are huge winners of this offseason. Meko is definitely one of the more desired free agents if you ask me, and they also just made some nice upgrades at the DPS lot by getting hydration. Now they have repel. This was a pretty successful offseason for the Houston Outlaws, and it doesn't end there because in other news, somebody finally decided to buy their team. Beasley Media Group has acquired the Houston Outlaws, and I could not be more happier for them. The Outlaws have been in a state of turmoil, and everybody from the players to the coaches have been feeling very uneasy about their situation since it was announced the team was in need of new owners. I'm sure all of the fans and people involved in the org are breathing one massive sigh of relief. They can finally rest easy. Now let's quickly talk about the Valiant. So the other day they finally made it official that Fact Fiction would not be returning to the team for 2020. As a Valiant fan, I am very thankful for what he contributed to this team. He played a big role in helping this team make a turnaround after their horrendous start to the year. His Reinhardt and Wrecking Ball in particular were pretty strong. It's sad to see him go, but I think it's for the best. According to Bren, Fact Fiction gets tilted easily when things don't go his way, and he ends up not calming much anymore. I think I can speak for most fans when I say this is something you don't want on your team. The Valiant need a true leader at main tank who knows how to keep his composure and not throw a tantrum when things don't go his way. Fact had himself a good redemption story with the Valiant though, so I think there's a good chance he finds a new home at some point in the future. I could see him maybe being a mid-season pickup for a team like the way he was for the Valiant in 2019. Okay, home stretch now, 2 more things to go. So first off, the Seoul Dynasty have signed Wizard Young as their new strategic coach. I really don't know how the rest of you feel, but I was expecting Wizard Young to either be a head coach or an assistant coach somewhere, and I find it hard to believe that he couldn't find a job. I think it's more that he wanted to get some sort of job for Seoul, even if it meant taking a lesser role. And I mean, who can blame the guy? He can still coach, but he gets to do it at home in Korea now. Sounds like a pretty good deal if you ask me. And last, but certainly not least, the San Francisco Shock made an announcement regarding their coaching staff. The Shock signed former Talon Esports head coach Arachne, at least I believe that's how you say it. I mentioned it in a previous video, but Talon has been a dominant force in Pacific contenders, and they more than held their own in the gauntlet. I think he will make for a great addition to an already great coaching staff. He'll be joining the likes of Krusty and Junkbunk. It's actually mind-blowing to think the Shock are stacked with their player roster and coaching staff. It's honestly kind of unfair. They're unbelievably loaded. And with that said, that's basically it. That wraps up this episode of the Overwatch News Recap. If you enjoyed this content, then be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also consider following me on Twitter at ATP Overwatch and joining my Discord server through the link in the description. As always, thank you all so much for watching today's video. I really do appreciate it. And until next time, this is ATP signing out. Peace.